Greetings, APUSH scholars, for our review on Unit 3, the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. I'm looking off a review sheet here, class, and some terms and events and people you should know. The idea of republicanism is the belief in the equality of men, a government without a king, opposition to hierarchy, and there's a term called Republican motherhood. And this is the idea that a woman's job is to raise children, to be patriotic. The woman's job is to raise little Republicans, people who value the equality of all Americans and are part of this nascent democracy. And involved here is this idea of the cult of domesticity, that a woman's place is at home taking care of such children. The Articles of Confederation, at this point, you should be familiar with the successes and weaknesses of the Articles. We do away with them. They are the instrument that sets up a Congress between 1781 and 1788. This is the government that will govern the country in the last years of the Revolutionary War. And when the war is over, when the peace treaty is signed in 1783, they will govern the country for 5 years until we have our Constitution and George Washington. So from the time of the Revolution, the end of the Revolution, to the time of Washington, we've got 5 years where we don't have a president. But what we have here are virtually independent, sovereign, autonomous states. And there's this very weak government called the Articles of Confederation Government, or the Articles of Confederation Congress. The successes basically are a very successful peace treaty called the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and what this does is the British acknowledge our independence. They give us a very generous land settlement in the West, where the United States is going to go all the way to the Mississippi River. And the land ordinance of 1785 is going to divide the West into townships, and every out of 36 sections in a township, one of them is going to be reserved for schools, and this sets up a rational, fair, coherent way to divide land and to settle it. And the land is going to be sold for something in the ballpark of $1 an acre, and this is going to be one of the ways the Articles of Confederation will be funded. Not very well, but it is a source of income. The Northwest Ordinance, better known, 1787, is going to provide a plan, a path for statehood for new states. And if you have 5,000 people, you can have self-government with the approval of Congress, of course. 60,000 people, you can submit a constitution to the Congress, and you can come in as a free and equal state. One thing that's very significant, no slavery north of the Ohio River in the Northwest Territory. That would be the current states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. The weaknesses, why we eventually get rid of the Articles of Confederation: there is no separate chief executive. There is no separate president. There are no national courts to settle disputes. The taxes are voluntary quotas, which aren't paid and aren't collected. So the Articles of Confederation government can't pay its debts, most notably to soldiers who fought in the war, and the money it issued was worthless. It was inflated. There's trade wars between states, and there's weakness in foreign policy. The Brits are still in western forts, and the Spanish are in a fort down in Natchez, in territory that we claim in what would be the southwest at this time, and we don't have the ability to raise an army. And this comes into sharp focus with Shays' rebellion. Daniel Shays is a Revolutionary War veteran who fought through most of the war with Washington. He goes home after winning this war against unjust taxes, and he's told to pay taxes. Only he's told to pay them in what's called specie. Silver and gold, he can't do it. His land is foreclosed, as are many of his neighbors who are fellow veterans, and they're going to march on the local courts to shut them down and to forestall the dispossession of these patriotic soldiers who fought but weren't paid. So there's a severe injustice that happens. What this does, it's going to spook the creditor class. It's going to spook the ruling elite in Massachusetts and in the rest of the colonies that the war against England is won, but it's descending into chaos, into anarchy, into rebellion. So there's going to be a meeting called of basically the power elite in Philadelphia, a convention which is supposed to amend. It's supposed to revise the Articles of Confederation, and instead you have a sort of a kind of an overthrow in which the Constitutional Convention will propose a brand new constitution, will propose a stronger government, and will bypass the state legislatures. Will call for state conventions to approve the Constitution. And the big compromises that you should know are called the Great Compromise, also called the Connecticut Compromise, and this is going to placate the small states that are afraid of being pushed around by the big states by giving them a Senate where each state has an equal number of senators, 2 per state, and a House of Representatives where the states that have more people, such as Virginia, will have proportional representation. Both these houses will have to pass a law for it to go on to the president for his signature. The other compromise is the 3/5 compromise. The southern states don't have so many white people, but they want credit for apportionment in the House of Representatives, and that's going to be at a 3/5 ratio, that for every 5 slaves you have, you get credit for 3 white people. Why would anybody oppose this new Constitution? This is the oldest written Constitution in the world at this point. It gives us our very stable and enduring government, which we have now. And the reasons why there's opposition is the fear of, we just fought a Revolutionary War against an unjust king and against oppressive taxes, so why set up a new government that has a president with strength? Why set up a government that can tax us more easily, that can raise an army? There's the fear of a loss of state freedom. And these are the anti-federalists. They're going to be in opposition to the ratification process for the new Constitution. And they're going to be placated, at least enough to get this Constitution ratified, by the promise of a Bill of Rights, which is not originally in the Constitution. The Constitution is a plan of government, a plan of increasing the power of this new government. The ratification is going to require 9 out of 13 states. The original plan under the Articles for a big change is you needed 13 out of 13. So the guys at Philadelphia know they're not going to get 13 out of 13, so they're going with 9 out of 13. And again, this is sort of an act of subversion. And some of the small states like Delaware think, hey, there's safety in numbers, so they're going to be among the first to ratify the new Constitution. Rhode Island, for a couple of years, is going to be the odd man out. They fear getting ganged up on by the bigger states. And the new Constitution, differences with the Articles of Confederation, there's this contrast. No president, now there's a president. Inability to tax, now there's ability to tax. The rebellion of Shays Rebellion can't be put down. Under Washington, there's going to be the Whiskey Rebellion in western Pennsylvania, which an army will be raised and will put it down. You have the inability to negotiate with other countries who not only don't fear us but don't respect us. Now there's going to be several successful treaties, which I'll name in a few minutes here. So there's this contrast between the weak Articles of Confederation and the stronger national government. Trade wars under the Articles, now only Congress can regulate interstate trade under the new Constitution. You should be familiar with the First Amendment. The Bill of Rights, there's 10 of them, but the one that you should know, at least for this test, the First Amendment's often called freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition, freedom of religion. 3 presidents to know for this test that's coming up. Under George Washington, you should know the political differences between Jefferson and Hamilton. They're going to represent an outlook on government which persists today, at least sort of theoretically in a general way. The Jeffersonians are the descendants of the anti-federalists, the people who feared and opposed this new Constitution. The Hamiltonians are going to be the party of strong, active government. The Jeffersonians wanted small government. Hamilton wanted large government. The Jeffersonians wanted strong states. The Hamiltonians, or the Federalists more properly, wanted states that were subordinate to a strong national government. Jefferson was pro-farmer, Hamilton was pro-business, pro-city, pro-urban, pro-industry. Jefferson was definitely pro-France, pro-French Revolution. Hamilton was pro-Great Britain. Jefferson, and when I'm saying Jefferson and Hamilton, we're referring to their supporters as well, of course. Jefferson is a supporter of what's called strict construction of the Constitution. If it does not say you can do it, you can't do it, where Hamilton is loose construction. And that is the Constitution should be interpreted liberally. And you have what's called the elastic clause, that the government can do what is necessary and proper for the general welfare. Jefferson believed and he trusted in the common man, and Hamilton did not. He believed the common man was turbulent and that he was prone to follow demagogues. 1789, important date to know, in Europe intersects with our history, and that is the French Revolution, which the Jeffersonians support. It's another example of a revolution against an unjust king by the masses, but the Hamiltonian party, the Federalists, are going to watch it descend into a bloodbath, a reign of terror, and they're going to be on the side of stability and order, and that's going to be the Brits, who are our primary trading partners, both immediately after the Revolution and into the constitutional period here. Washington is going to proclaim neutrality, and this is controversial because it basically reneges on our treaty with the French. We're allied with the French still at this point against England, and we're not backing the French, and this is probably a wise move as we are weak at this point. Remember, France, after the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, sent soldiers to fight with us, sent its navy to help bottle up Cornwallis at Yorktown when he surrenders in 1781. That's basically really the end of the Revolutionary War. For all practical purposes, the French fund us, they provide a line of credit, and then we don't repay them with being their allies in the war against Britain during the Revolutionary War here, the French Revolutionary Wars. Hamilton's three-part economic plan, the short of it is he comes up with a plan to pay off the national debt. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to issue new debt to pay off the old debt, which gives us credit and gives us credibility. He's going to raise tariffs to provide a source of income for the new government and to protect what's called domestic industry, and he's going to set up a national bank to provide credit for the business which he supports. The purpose here of Hamilton's plan is to provide economic stability and credibility in contrast to the inflated, worthless paper money and constant debt of the Articles, which helped lead to the revolt of the former soldiers in Massachusetts under Shea. The Whiskey Rebellion, how is this different from Shea's Rebellion? The Whiskey Rebellion is going to be a protest by Western farmers in Pennsylvania, sort of similar to Shea's Rebellion. They don't want to pay the taxes on whiskey, which are being passed by a Democratic government under the new Constitution. And Washington's going to raise an army, which, kind of interesting, is larger than any single force that he had at his disposal in the Revolutionary War, and the whiskey rebels are going to, many of them will be arrested and they're going to be tried, and basically there's no shooting. They vanish in the face of a national government, which will enforce a tax that has been democratically passed. Successful treaties under the Constitution. You've got Jay's Treaty, which the British will agree to get out of the Western Forts. This keeps the peace with England, at least until the War of 1812. Pinckney's Treaty, also called the Treaty of San Lorenzo. The Spanish sort of see the handwriting on the wall that American settlers are moving into the West. They decide to keep the peace with us, and Spain gives us what's called the right of deposit in New Orleans, which we do not control at this time. It is controlled by Spain, at least until Napoleon takes over Spain later on in the Napoleonic Wars. But we are given permission, all the farmers that are sending their stuff down the tributaries to the Mississippi and down the Mississippi now can drop their stuff off and ship it out without being taxed or hassled. And then the Treaty of Greenville is going to be with the Indians in Ohio. Essentially, the Indians will surrender Ohio to the new United States government. John Adams, he comes into power 2 elections. Washington's in for 2 terms. And Adams is going to be a Federalist, and he's kind of paranoid about French revolutionaries in the United States and within the U.S. government, and he's going to pass what are called the Alien and Sedition Acts and the Naturalization Act. The Alien Act allows the U.S. government to deport aliens, French revolutionaries. The Sedition Act punishes dissent, punishes disagreement and opposition, whether it's in writing, whether it's speeches. And under the Sedition Act, Republican newspaper editors and journalists are going to be jailed. The Naturalization Act increases the time to be a U.S. citizen from 5 to 14 years. So the idea here is if somebody's rabble-rousing, kick them out of the country. And 2 states are going to be in opposition to these laws, saying that they are unconstitutional and that a state has a right to declare them null and void within their borders. And those 2 states are Virginia and Kentucky. And the 2 Republicans that will be the authors of these resolutions are going to be, interestingly enough, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. There's this fear that here, what the Anti-Federalists feared, the national government has become oppressive. And there's a violation here, of course, of the First Amendment. There's this fear that the states are losing their sovereignty, that the government's becoming big and oppressive. And by the way here, Adams will be a one-term president, very likely because of the Alien and Sedition Acts. The XYZ affair is under Adams. There's what's called the quasi-naval war with France between 1798 and 1800. The French are picking off American ships that are trading across the Atlantic with Great Britain, and Adams sends American diplomats over to negotiate with the French to stop this, and the French demand a bribe for us to see the French foreign minister, which we do not pay. They come back, it leaks out that our honor, our national pride has been insulted, and Adams proceeds to build a navy. Washington's called out of retirement, an army is built. A lot of Americans are looking for war against France at this point, and Adams, in a very unpopular decision, he continues this neutrality. He keeps us out of war. And this also adds to his unpopularity. Probably a good move at this point because, again, we're not strong compared to the British. The Midnight Justices and the 1801 Judiciary Act. When Jefferson wins the election of 1800 against Adams, the Republicans, these are the Jeffersonians, will win the presidency, they will win the Senate, and they will win the House. The Federalists look like they're losing control of the government. So they passed the Judiciary Act, sets up some new courts, and packs these new courts with Federalists who, if you know your constitutional history, judges in the United States serve for life. And this is supposed to be a balance against the Republicans who are coming into office. They're called the Midnight Justices because this law is passed at sort of the stroke of stroke of midnight here at the last minute. And Marbury is a man who is a Republican who has been given a commission. Marbury is a Federalist who's been given a commission by the outgoing Federalists, and he's going to demand that the Republicans give him his commission. And Madison, who I believe is the Secretary of State, is he's the person in the Jefferson administration who's supposed to give Marbury his job, refuses to do so. So we have a Supreme Court case. Marbury wants his job, he wants his commission, and Jefferson/Madison are not giving it to him, and the Supreme Court rules against Marbury. That's interesting. It is a Federalist Supreme Court is ruling against a Federalist office seeker, and the argument of Marbury is that he has what's called the Supreme Court has what's called the writ of mandamus. It has the power to order the chief executive to do his job. The Supreme Court says this was an improper power that Congress gave to the Supreme Court. So why would the Supreme Court turn down a power given to it by a fellow Federalist branch of government? And the answer here is now by striking this law down, this is the first time this happens in American history. It's not explicitly in the Constitution. It's I think, assumed. But the Supreme Court is exercising judicial review. This is the first time that the court strikes down a law as unconstitutional. This is a huge, arguably a power grab. It's a huge statement of power of the Supreme Court. in the future against this Republican government, which will be in power for an awful long time. Jefferson, a Republican, serves 2 terms, as does Madison, two terms, as does the next guy, Monroe. So the Republicans are in power for a long time, and the Supreme Court is saying we have the power to overturn a law as unconstitutional. Judicial review. Thomas Jefferson comes into power he wins in 1800, sworn in to office in 1801, and he buys Louisiana from Napoleon. Louisiana is not that little dinky state down there today. Louisiana refers to all the land between the Appalachian Mountains and the Rockies, that all the water drains through into the Mississippi. And the reason for this is Jefferson originally is negotiating just for New Orleans because we want to have access to the right of deposit in the future. And Napoleon shocks the American diplomats by offering the entire Louisiana purchase for a little higher price. And this is inconsistent with Jefferson's philosophy. He does buy it. But remember, Jefferson believes in strict construction, and it doesn't say in the Constitution that the national government can buy land. It certainly doesn't say it can buy a third of the North American continent from a French dictator. But Jefferson fortunately does this. He does buy this slice of America. And another interesting fact, we don't have the money to buy this. So we go and we borrow money off of European bankers. And how are we able to do this? Because Hamilton has made us creditworthy. The bank that Jefferson despised and hated and philosophically was against was the tool that allowed the United States to pay Napoleon for this land. All right, countries interfering with U.S. trade after independence. The 2 countries are France, remember the quasi-naval war, 1798 to 1800. But after this, after essentially the Battle of Trafalgar is sort of symbolic of the primacy of British naval power over the French, the Brits are going to, as we head into 1812, are going to be picking off American ships, blocking our trade with France right off of our coast, and they are going to be impressing our sailors. Basically, that means dragooning them, stopping our ships and pulling off sailors to work in their navy. And this is going to be a source of national humiliation through the administrations of Adams and Jefferson and into Madison when the War of 1812 will break out. And what were reasons that slavery was abolished in every northern state shortly after the Revolution? One is the idea of republicanism, this idea of the equality of men, the idea that you shouldn't have a king, the idea of resistance to hierarchy. These Republican values are going to be seen in the legislatures, which will ban slavery. For the most part, it's a gradual ban. There's a number of years where slavery is still allowed and the freeing of children, but slavery is put on a path to extinction. There's going to be this Enlightenment belief that all men have natural rights. Think of John Locke and how we're born free. You have the Quakers, who are a northern religious group which believe slavery is evil. You have slaves who fought in the Revolutionary War in Washington's army. And economically, slavery has not taken deep root. It was at one time in every colony in the North, but it has not taken deep root. It has not spread like it has in the South. So collectively, the northern states are going to agree that slavery is incompatible with human freedom and democracy and self-government. Why does slavery spread in the South after 1794? The AP is really big on slavery, and cotton is a key word here. Cotton is not a key crop. It's not the main crop in the South before the, as I say, Civil War, before the Revolutionary War. Let me make that clear. Cotton is a big crop before the Civil War, but before the Revolutionary War, cotton is a crop, but it's an expensive crop. But the cotton gin in 1794 makes the production of cotton extremely profitable. The price of cotton plummets, and cotton is in high demand, and there's demand for land to be cleared, and the demand for slavery skyrockets for clearing land and planting and harvesting cotton. So the cotton gin is going to lead to a demand for more slavery, the spread of slavery, the strengthening of slavery in the South. So there you are. There's your drive-by review, gang. If you have any questions, hunt me down before the test. Good luck. Study early. Study smart. Signing out.